All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Andrew Linehan. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Admission at Northwestern, graduate of Northwestern from the Medill School of Journalism, which hopefully you've heard of if you're tuning into this session. I have 2 degrees, a journalism bachelor's degree, and then I later got an integrated marketing communication master's. So I'm really excited personally about this session. Hope you all are excited as well. We have really cool opportunity to allow you to connect with one of our favorite staff faculty members at Northwestern, Dean Charles Whitaker. For those of you who don't know, and I'll let him introduce himself, but he has just done awesome things for our journalism school, the media, marketing opportunities within it. But he is also one of our own. So we're really, really proud to kind of have a leader that is very close to the product and the experience and the community that we talk so fondly of. So Dean Whitaker, you want to introduce yourself to these students, and then we'll get started with connecting you to them?
Yeah, happy to, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And like Andrew, I too am a Medillian through and through. I got my bachelor's and master's degrees here, both in journalism. I'm a tad bit away from a PhD from Northwestern, also in human development and social policy. So I do, as they say, bleed purple. Have loved the institution, have loved working at the institution. After leaving, I worked in newspapers for a bit at the Miami Herald and the Louisville Courier-Journal, then went to work in magazines for Ebony Magazine, which is what brought me back to Chicago. It was based here in Chicago, worked there for 11 years before coming to work at Medill in 1992. And some 30 years later, here I am still at the institution.
Awesome. So I'm sure you guys are entering with some burning questions. So just kind of a lay of the land as we get started here. There's a little Q&A box you should see icon on the bottom of your screens or on your phones. Feel free to just start asking questions now, or as Dean Whitaker and I dialogue, and something comes up or something you're curious about, leave it in the chat. I will curate the chat and surface some good questions, pertinent questions that we can talk about. I think to start, just want to have you, Dean, kind of just talk a little bit about what you feel like one of the great value propositions is here at Medill. It's certainly something that, as a prospective student, I really bought into when I was looking at schools. I knew I wanted a top tier academic institution, which I'm sure a lot of these students are thinking about. Northwestern clearly as just a brand on the whole is thought of as a place with a really rich community, a lot of great academic resources for them, to kind of really have a great undergraduate experience. But I also wanted journalism. So I was in the unique, even though we didn't have like the internet for college searches, I was in kind of that unique position of like being able to have an academic interest where I could like look at a ranking or look at a college guidebook that said like, hey, you should think about Northwestern. They're a really good journalism school. And I had a mentor. My mentor was Peter Vesey. He was a New York Post journalist. Yeah. And I remember he would always talk to me about, he'd always say like, why do you want a journalism school? Just like, if you want a job in journalism, all they care about is whether or not you can write. You just have to like, go be interesting, like go major in Russian or something. And I remember I was like, well, no, but I don't want a journalism education. But when I went on my tour at Northwestern, I remember it really resounding with me that so much of my journalism experience could be kind of outside of the journalism world here. And whatever class I took in whatever department or whoever people I met were not just going to be the future NBC nightly news reporters and writers for the New York Times. It was going to be people that exposed me to a lot of different areas, which I thought was really, really special. So, can you just speak on that a little bit, just in terms of kind of what our students are getting here, not only with an elite journalism education and community and experience, but also kind of having that role within a world-class university?
Yeah, well, it is an elite journalism experience with amazing faculty who are not just scholars of journalism, but are really dedicated professionals with long professional histories. But the beauty of Medill is that it's one of the few, it's actually the only top journalism school for undergraduates that's also embedded in a premier top 10 private university. Most of the other top journalism schools are in public institutions. None of the top 10 universities in the country have undergraduate journalism programs. And the beauty of that is that you have all of the, as you said, Andrew, the wonderful resources of a great Research One institution. You are learning alongside of some of the best and brightest students in the country, and you are exposed to a wealth of fields and disciplines in a really rich environment. And yet, Northwestern is, in my mind, a perfect size to get to know faculty, but on a very personal level, either within the journalism school or outside of the journalism school. About 70% of our students will double major in something outside of journalism. That's because we are on the quarter system. The quarter system allows you to take so many more classes than you do on the semester system, and only about a fourth of those classes are actually in the journalism program. So the Medill degree really is a liberal arts degree, I tell people, with a journalism overlay, which gives you lots of room to take a deep dive into other disciplines as well. The Medill program is a very experiential program. It's based not just on learning theoretically about how to do journalism, but on getting out and doing journalism, not just in Evanston, but also where Northwestern is based, but in Chicago. We also have opportunities for students to go to work as Capitol Hill reporters in Washington, D.C. in our Medill on the Hill program. They can go to San Francisco to work in our San Francisco area on San Francisco outpost on design thinking. And by the time these students enroll, we also will have a brand new outpost in New York City that will allow students to do some work in New York as well. In addition, we take about half of our sophomores on something called Medill Journeys, where they will spend spring break on reporting trips around the country and around the world. They will go to London, Paris, Chile, Japan, Puerto Rico on reporting trips as well. So it really is an experience-based, hands-on program. Not to mention kind of the cornerstone of the undergraduate program, which has been around for 50 years, and that's our journalism residency program, where every junior and senior is allowed the opportunity to work for 1 quarter at a marketing or journalism outlet that we will pair them with, or in some instances that with enough planning, they may curate a journalism residency experience on their own.
Great. We have a question from Tate, who's clearly a budding journalist because he uses a quote in his question, and he attributes it to the Medill website. It says on the opening page of the Medill's website that the school is, quote, training a new generation of multimedia journalists, communicators, and marketers who aren't only thriving in this evolving media landscape, but also helping shape it, end quote. How do you think technology will continue to transform the journalism business in years to come? Tate is particularly interested to see how Medill's teaching method would be adjusted amidst the transformation of the field.
Yeah, so we have been, it's interesting. Journalism education was relatively static until the digital revolution kind of upended both the industry, the practice, and the business models for the industry. And we have evolved with that, incorporating lots of technology in our teaching. We used to be a very siloed school in which students sort of learn to be journalists based on the platform that they were interested in. You were a broadcast major, you were a magazine major, a newspaper specialist, if you will. We now cross-train all students across those areas, in addition to making sure that they have some facility with audio. Everyone should come out of the school with some working knowledge of how to shoot and edit video, as well as do a bit of still photography. Those are the tools that any 21st century journalist is going to need, in addition to understanding how to report as well as produce content on social media, even though social media is evolving all the time, but we're constantly trying to evolve the curriculum with that. The new buzz and the thing that we are thinking about and working with is artificial intelligence. How will we use large language models to sort of help us with ideation, not to write the stories per se, but to help us think through the drafts of those stories, to help us develop new ideas, to sort of get those stories started. We are not shying away from the use of artificial intelligence. It is here. We know that many of our students are developing a familiarity with it. We are crafting the parameters around around the ways in which it can be used in the classroom, but also trying to develop the guidelines for how it'll be used in industry. Medill likes to think of itself today. Once upon a time, we were always a premier training ground for the journalists of the future. We now like to think of ourselves as the thought leaders for the industry of today. It's important that we roll our sleeves up and sort of help point a path forward for the industry, because people who are involved day to day in journalism are often too mired in thinking about the business models and getting stories out to really reflect on the rapidly changing technology. We're trying to help them do that.
Yeah, I usually tell students, this is obviously a couple of decades ago, but part of the value of, this is something to think about when you're thinking of, exposure to faculty, is not just, is a faculty member going to know your name, but does this school have resources to get top faculty, which on the undergraduate level means, are they going to be connected to the undergrads, but are they also going to be connected to that experience as it pertains to where that industry is going, right? And for me, from 2001 to 2005, I tell students all the time, if I had a journalism school that in 2001, as a first year, was teaching me what journalism was like in 2001, a lot of my print friends, certainly I was broadcast, but a lot of my print friends wouldn't have had a job in 2005 because they wouldn't have known video, right? And so
exactly.
We had faculty that understood that a media convergence was coming. And so they could say like, okay, you want to write for the New York Times? Great. You better learn how to have a camcorder at that press conference.
Absolutely.
Because the New York Times is going to have a website in 2005.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I encourage you in your college search process to think about things like that in terms of the value of faculty, not just, will you get to know someone one-on-one, though that's certainly important as well.
But let me say, I want to hastily add, though, that we don't shy away from the basics. We are a writing-based school in many ways. We think that good quality writing is the foundation of all media and communications, and we still strongly emphasize writing. And we know so many students initially are interested in journalism because they think of themselves as writers first, and we want to encourage that and nurture that as well. So while we are absolutely focused on technology and focused on the new tools that enable us to gather and produce content, we're also interested in nurturing the wordsmiths of the world. We have amazing writers on the faculty. We have a new program a new chair, the George R.R. Martin Chair in Creative Writing. George R.R. Martin, the author of the Game of Thrones series, is a Medill alum, and he endowed a chair. So we are dipping a toe into creative writing as well. So I sometimes think, when we emphasize the new and we emphasize technology, it can be off-putting to those people. And I came to journalism school because I saw myself as a writer first. It can be off-putting to those students who think of themselves as writers. So I do want to assure people that writing is still the foundation of the school, and we will never turn our back on that.
Somewhat good segue to a question from Noah, who asks, how does Medill School teach students to balance objectivity in portraying the story and the pressure to emphasize more quote unquote evocative headlines?
No, you obviously are following the news. So there is a heated debate within journalism and within our school. It's not so much a debate in our school, it's more a conversation about what the term objectivity really means. Because when it was used by previous generations, it was used to suggest that the reporter was a blank slate who sort of came to a story without any preconceived notions, and that he or she would craft a report that was devoid of any biases. And the reality is the act of crafting journalism is very much a subjective act. The quotes that you use or choose not to use, the things that you emphasize and choose not to emphasize, those are all subjective judgments. And so what we talk about now is not so much objectivity per se, but how do you craft a report that is the closest approximation to truth? How do we get at what is a nuanced, culturally competent and sound report that takes into account all of the factors that may have contributed to the making of this event, or the development of this legislation, or whatever it is that you are covering. We believe, and as many people believe, that objectivity is hard to achieve, if not impossible, again, because we all sort of view things through the lenses of our personal experiences. How do you take that into account? How can you be transparent about the lens that you are viewing this event through, and convey to the reader kind of what your thinking was as you were attempting to put this report together? And that's what we're striving for now. Again, we're striving for truth, for fairness, for balance. Those are the words we are using these days instead of objectivity.
Awesome. Let's dig into the curriculum a little bit. Just so those who aren't as familiar with Northwestern, certainly Medill does this arguably as good as anybody. Just kind of the curricular flexibility that we have as Northwestern students, even if you're not majoring in Medill, but want to expose yourself to a lot of different areas. But certainly that we can focus on the Medill curriculum specifically here. We have 2 questions from Evie. Does Northwestern encourage exploring fields and different areas of study, which certainly we can get into as you kind of lay out the curriculum and unpack that. And when does Northwestern require you, we can keep it to Medill, when does Medill require you to declare your major? Now, obviously, in Medill, there's there will be fewer majors, but I think the curricular flexibility will speak to that on a lot of different levels. And if we want to unpack Olivia's question within this answer, she's asking, when can Medill students start studying abroad? So we can kind of touch on that within the curricular flexibility.
Remind me of all of those.
I will.
In terms of, let's start with declaring your major. So one of the reasons I was so interested in Medill is because at Northwestern, when you are admitted to Medill, you are a journalism major. You come to Northwestern as a journalism major. That is not, you declare that at the time that that is declared at the time that you are admitted. We do allow a limited number of transfers from other schools into Medill, a very limited number, because we can only accommodate about as many students as we admit in each class. So there aren't many seats left, and we try to keep the skills-based classes in particular relatively small, so you'll have that one-on-one interaction and one-on-one feedback from the instructors. But you can declare, and we encourage you to explore other disciplines, because part of your distribution requirements, which are your requirements for graduation, one of your distribution requirements is to take a deep dive, meaning take 6 classes in some discipline outside of Medill. Generally, students do that in the College of Arts and Sciences. So the popular ones are political science, economics, sociology, and history, though a lot of students do gender studies, African American studies, some other form of ethnic studies as well. And the reason so many of our students double major is because once you start taking that deep dive into a discipline, it actually, they're actually encouraged, if not sometimes compelled, to take an even deeper dive. It's about 10 to 12 classes to double major. So many of them will keep going and earn enough units for a double major in that discipline. Medill also has 2 dual degree programs, and a dual degree is different than a double major. A double major simply is a transcript notation that says you've also fulfilled the degree requirements for this other major as well. A double major means you are enrolled equally in 2 schools. And so we have a double major in the School of Education and Social Policy and the School of Music. And Andrew, you can talk about how one applies to be a double major at enrollment, but that is a box that you can check when you are being admitted. But you can also apply to double major once to the dual degree programs once you are here. That means you then fulfill not only the degree requirements, but your diploma actually says that you have degrees in these 2 schools. And we strongly encourage students to double major, though you do not have to. Many students get in from day one and they're like, I am going to major in journalism and double major in computer science. And we always say, maybe you should take a class in that other major before you declare that that's what you want to do. And we encourage you to explore in your freshman and sophomore year. Take classes in multiple disciplines before you determine that this is the domain you would like to double major in. You may come in thinking you want to double major in one thing, discover something else, and decide that, and fall in love with it, and decide that's where you want to take a deep dive. For me, I accidentally enrolled in an anthropology class, having almost no idea what anthropology was. But that wound up being my double major because I absolutely loved that discipline and spent a good deal of time doing that. The other question was
study abroad.
Because of the journalism residency program, which typically happens in either end of junior year, from second quarter of junior year through second quarter of senior year, the sort of a 1-year window. And because of the Northwestern quarter system, which does not align with the semester system for most study abroad programs, most of our students who study abroad will do so fall quarter of junior year. That is the most popular time to double major. At that point, you are through most of your introductory journalism classes. So you've gone through all of the first year reporting curriculum and most of the second year reporting curriculum. Now, all that's left are sort of the requirements for the journalism residency and some electives. That's the perfect time to double major. Occasionally, if you are really industrious and the stars align, you can do a year-long study abroad, but that is very, very rare. And again, probably 40% of our students do study abroad, and the bulk of them will go fall quarter of junior year.
Yeah, really important to note for you prospective students out there. I don't know how much you're digging into each school you're looking at and the curricula, but I think it's especially now because you can get to it and the information is pretty accessible. What I understood and didn't understand before and after I got to Medill, and certainly as a professional who kind of surveys our peer set, is this curricular flexibility becomes a massive value to you on a lot of different levels. Selfishly, just if you want to double major, to be able to double major without overwhelming yourself or stressing yourself out because you have these other classes, whether they're liberal arts core, if you're going to double major in anthropology or minor in anthropology. If you're like me, I didn't even know what sociology was before I came to Medill, and my peer advisor was like, you got to take Intro to Sociology from Charles Moscos. He was Bill Clinton's military advisor at the time. And then I ended up double majoring in sociology. So you can do this without overwhelming yourself because it's incorporated into your curriculum. But to kind of extend that to the study abroad question, and this question we'll get to in a little bit, I think it's really important to also understand that to have an abroad experience, you don't necessarily need to study abroad. Colleges will throw around the term study abroad all the time. And that's the concept of, okay, a college in another country is affiliated with the school that you go to. And so if you want to go to New Zealand, you go to a college in New Zealand and you take classes that count for your curriculum, and then you come back. About a third of our Northwestern students will study abroad, but more than half of our students have an international experience. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. And so you might study abroad and go to take classes abroad, but you might also say, hey, I don't want to be away from Northwestern for a year. I might use my journalism residency and have an internship for 3 months abroad and work at a professional outfit because Medill has afforded me that opportunity, right? Or I might do a research project with a research grant, no money out of my pocket, abroad, to be able to see a country in a lot of different ways. So study abroad, absolutely a viable option.
We have the Explorers program for sophomores, which again,
yeah,
spring break working and studying abroad. And that's another opportunity for students who again may not want to. Right after COVID, many students they wanted to be on campus more than they wanted to be abroad. They had missed so much of the on-campus experience. So many of them chose sort of those limited experiences, of which we have many, to go abroad rather than doing a full quarter abroad.
Yeah, so that's one of the great benefits of both a school with tremendous resources, but also with tremendous curricular flexibility. Certainly something not to ignore. Okay, here's a question it's related to the last question that I wrestle with a lot, because a lot of students ask, and Ella has asked also, how does Medill's interdisciplinary approach to journalism allow students to pursue a journalism career that revolves around I'm reading the wrong one right now. Audrey, Ella, we're going to get to you next. Audrey says, how does Medill's location impact its curriculum and journalistic opportunities? In what ways are Medill and its Evanston and broader Chicago community connected? Which I always struggle with, because I want to tell students, okay, wait, it's not just like we're in a great location, there's awesome opportunities, but you can see the world and you can get exposed to the world. But Chicago is so incredible too.
Yeah,
we have a graduate school down in Chicago as well. So can you just talk about kind of the Chicagoland opportunities?
Yeah, I think that is one of the great value propositions of studying at Northwestern and at Medill, to have Chicago at your doorstep. And we encourage students to get into Chicago to do their reporting as much as possible. We make that possible by providing certain financial opportunities so that students can get in and out of the city. You can take the L, but sometimes students are reporting at night, and so we will pay for Ubers and things to make sure that they can get back. We want to make sure everyone gets back safely. We have, as Andrew said, a Chicago newsroom as well that students can work out of. Next quarter, two of our sophomore reporting classes will actually be conducted out of storefronts in Chicago. So students will actually go into Chicago. That'll be their newsroom or their laboratory. They will report out of that newsroom and report on the surrounding neighborhood. So it is wonderful to be in a city, near a city that is as vibrant as Chicago, that has so many cultural, political, historical opportunities to study. That's a great laboratory to be producing journalism in. And we, again, try to get our students out as much as possible. We'll be doing a lot of election coverage next year, in the coming year, I should say, both in the Chicago area, but also out of Medill on the Hill in Washington, D.C. Those students will get outside of Washington and get on the campaign trail and go and talk to voters and candidates across the country as well. So it is great to be in and on the cusp of a major city. It's a wonderful benefit.
All right, Ella, we're going to get to you now. Ella and Aiden also asked a similar question. And I think this is a great question because it allows us to talk about a true strength, kind of back to that curricular flexibility, but with the theme of interdisciplinary. Ella asks, how does Medill's interdisciplinary approach to journalism allow students to pursue a journalism career that revolves around their interests, e.g. global affairs, political science, international relations? So yes, there's one journalism major, but could you speak to kind of how students branch off and really allow the interdisciplinary nature of the curriculum to really kind of give them an advantage when they enter the workplace?
Yeah, there's the double major, but we also, many of our reporting classes are rooted in disciplines as well. We have a science writing class, we have a politics and government reporting class, we have a class that is focused just on the city of Evanston and sort of understanding governmental affairs. So we allow faculty, we have a class that's devoted to coverage of HIV and AIDS. So we allow the faculty to take the areas that they have sort of reported in and develop classes around those. That enables students, again, to take a deep dive into some topic areas that may interest them and that they may want to write in, while also, again, allowing them to pull into their journalism classes knowledge that they've gleaned from their double major or other classes that they are taking. So
awesome. All right, Wallace is going to start to get personal a little bit. You ready for this?
Sure.
Mr. Whitaker, I read somewhere that you were involved in the Cherup Summer Program. I'm interested in applying this spring, but can you tell me more about the value of that program? So this is obviously for all you seniors, you can tune out for a couple minutes, but for any juniors or sophomores on the show, you talk about Cherup's program for a little bit.
Yeah, so the Cherup's program, it's the National High School Journalism Institute, aka the Cherup Program. It got that's the nickname for it that it got in the 1930s or so when it was developed. Someone said the high schoolers looked like little cherubs running across the campus. It is a 4-week immersive experience where we bring high school students, top high school journalism students to campus. And again, they have an incredibly immersive, intensive 4-week journalism boot camp, if you will, working in groups with faculty members. It really is, in many ways, it's the entire first year curriculum of Medill compressed into 4 weeks. And I can say, I was teaching here for a long time before I started teaching in the Cherup program, and I wasn't a Cherup myself. Surprisingly, I didn't know about it when I was a high school student. And people when I told people I was from Medill who didn't go to Medill but had gone through the Cherup program, they would tell me how life-changing it was, and I would hear all this stuff about how amazing the Cherup program was. And it wasn't until I started teaching in it that I realized that it really is a very, very special experience, because to be surrounded by, it's 84 students, to be surrounded by 84 students who are also as passionate about journalism and writing as you are, is just a really unique experience for a high school student. You quickly develop this love and affinity for Medill and Northwestern. And yeah, it's just, I can't say enough about how very special that experience is.
And to build off of that, and even for seniors now kind of looking to launch their careers, Wallace also asks, what advice do you have for students starting to think about pursuing journalism? So whatever stage they're at in high school, what would you suggest as someone who's seen thousands of budding journalists that they start thinking about?
I would say do it, really start doing journal. The beauty of the digital age, once upon a time, you had to wait to invite someone to join a staff or be a part of staff. And I still, strongly encourage that. I think there's nothing quite like being a part of a journalism staff, whether it's at your high school or in some other forum. There are lots of other community-based high school journalism programs for high school students. But also, I would say you have the opportunity through social media, through developing a website, to sort of start developing your own brand as a journalist now. You can start blogging and writing and doing webcasts. You can start the podcasting technology has gotten so easy to use that you can develop your own podcast. And so just demonstrating to others that you are interested in journalism by doing it, and taking a deep dive into some area that you're passionate about, sort of developing your expertise right now, no matter what it is. It doesn't have to be anything serious. It doesn't have to be politics. It can be sports and fashion or theater or movies, but starting to write about that now, developing an expertise, developing a voice, doing reporting, actually sort of not just doing opinion pieces about that stuff, but actually thinking critically and analytically about the topics that you're deeply interested in and writing about those and posting those, making sure that it's a decent quality. I mean, be thorough, ask others to read it, get their opinions of it before you put it out there. Because the thing about the internet is that once it's there, it is there forever. Even if you try to pull it down, it will follow you. And so you don't want to put anything out there that is embarrassing, that you may otherwise come to regret. But starting to work and again, develop your brand, develop your voice now, but also working in a staff. That is the way to establish yourself as a journalist these days. And again, the barriers to entry have been obliterated by the digital age, which makes it very easy for anyone to launch themselves into the space. So do it. And then what I think journalism school does is it helps you reflect on that stuff that you are producing now and hone it and perfect it in a way. So it's a finishing school, if you will, to the work that you started producing when you were young. So
one of my biggest bits of advice to high school students when I'm engaging with them, not just journalism, but just in the college search process, is really think about, because you have the ability now to really dig into these colleges, really think about not just your 4-year experience, but what that 4-year experience and what that community does for you for the rest of your life. What kind of character traits you're developing because of that community. What does an inclusive, collaborative community do for you just as a person, as a leader in organizations? When you're done, our football team has a slogan, 40 is greater than 4, meaning that if you come to Northwestern, your next 40 years are going to be really valuable, not just your next 4 years, which I love. And it's so true. And so we have a question from Finian about the Medill Alumni Network, asking how strong is it across the U.S. And I would say let's talk about how strong it is across the world.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool too. But the U.S. also. Just speak to the Alumni Network.
It is an international network. You literally cannot enter a newsroom in the U.S. and not find a Medill alum. We are absolutely everywhere and known everywhere within the industry. And that, I think that's becoming as true for journalism as it is for marketing and strategic communications as well. We're also in those. And I was at the theater over the weekend, and the director of communications for the theater that I went to said, "Oh, I'm a proud Medill alum as well." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." So we literally are everywhere, and that's incredibly valuable, because the other thing about Medill alums that I absolutely love as dean is that they are so willing to help other Medill alums. They are always willing to give advice to current students or students who are about to enter the marketplace. It is rare that a Medill alum turns away another Medill alum when or a Medill student when they are reaching out to ask for advice. And as Andrew suggested, yeah, it's not just domestically, but internationally as well. We have a very, very large footprint, and I think that holds you in good stead when you go out and launch yourself into the world. It is a recognizable brand, if you will, and what people recognize about it is that the training is very sound. People feel comfortable and confident when you see a Medill alum's resume cross your desk, that they are well trained, that they sort of understand the basics, that they are thoughtful and dedicated, but also that they have a strong grounding in the ethics of journalism. Because when people say to me sometimes, what's the value of a journalism degree, and as someone told Andrew, you should just go out and major in Russian and then launch yourself in journalism. I think what a journalism degree constantly reminds you of is the incredible responsibility that we have as journalists to accuracy, to fairness, to balance, to providing, as I said before, the closest approximation to truth as we can. That is a really heady responsibility that we take seriously. And the conversations around that and the grounding in that you get in journalism school are really, really important. There are lots of places in the real world of journalism where those values and principles are not practiced as stringently as I might like. But I'm proud to say that Medill alums, when they enter those spaces, always sort of hark back to their Medill training and say, without being a jerk about it, I think we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard. And I am proud that we have infused them with that while they are here, and that they are carrying that forward into the industry.
Let's shift gears to the out of class, out of curriculum side of just student life. One of the great benefits, I think, of the quarter system and of kind of incorporating the peripheral academic experiences into your curriculum is you get more time as a college student, even at a top tier, highly selective, challenging, rigorous academic environment. You get a lot of time to yourself for yourself and to explore your interests with your friends and with your peers. And I think an underrated part of the experience as a Medill journalist is the value you get out of your extracurricular activities. So we have some questions about the role the student publications play at Northwestern. Certainly it goes beyond publications, right? We have media outlets. We have a lot of different ways to get involved as a journalist or as a storyteller or as a marketer. Could you speak to some of those and kind of just as an academic and as a dean, kind of how you see those kind of integrating into growing and grooming a student for success after college?
Yeah, the student publications are really important. I think the foundational work in journalism is done in the classroom, but a lot of the polishing happens in the student publications. And we have student publications for almost every interest or identity that one can imagine. We have the Daily Northwestern, which is the grandfather of them all, or grandmother of them all. It has been around more than 130 years or so, very well respected. But we have North by Northwestern, which is a magazine and website. We have several sports publications. We have students for student publication for students who identify as African American called Blackboard. We have students publication for students who identify as Asian called A. We have Stitch, the fashion magazine. We have Spoon, the cooking magazine. We have magazines for comedy writers. Or magazines or websites. These are largely websites. But we have a number of publications, and we encourage students to produce their own. They are all independent entities in that they do not report to me. They are not under the aegis of the school. They do their own fundraising, although I do some fundraising for them because I believe in the value of student publications, but we have no say in their editorial output. Many of them have advisors who are within the school. Some have have a board of advisors who may be alumni and others, but they do not report to me, nor are they beholden to me, nor do I have the ability to censor the content in those publications. Sometimes I wish I did. Sometimes I'm happy that I don't. But I like that arrangement as well, because it gives them the opportunity the space to be critical of the administration if they care to, without fear of reprisal or censorship from the dean or other entities. But yeah, they're a really important component. And one of the reasons I do fundraising for them is because those publications have suffered the same fate as many legacy publications in terms of the business model. They used to be supported largely through advertising, and as the internet has forced a lot of that advertising online and it's sort of dried up for them, they have struggled financially. And I have, used the power of the deanship, the pulpit of the deanship, to sort of appeal to alums and others to help to support those publications, because I do think a strong journalism school does need strong student publications.
And I'd add to that also, like anecdotally, just the value I got out of the just the demeanor and perspective and inclusive collaborative spirit of the students here, which I talk about all the time. Just Northwestern on the whole, I think one of our great value propositions is you are going to be surrounded in a community with peers like you have never been before, right? Everyone is brilliant, everyone is ambitious, everyone's hardworking, everyone's tuned into what's happening in the world. And one of the hardest things in this environment is to remind yourself that you belong here too. And so I think in the world of mental health, to think about a community that, yes, is turbocharged, yes, has unbelievable publications, Emmy award-winning television network, all this stuff, all these opportunities that you have here, the equipment you have, to be around smart, ambitious people that want to be your friend and want to get along with you and want to do something as a team. To me, that was really special. One of my biggest fears of coming to a place like this was, oh my God, I'm going to the top journalism school arguably in the world. Like, I'm going to have to there's going to be people ripping pages out of my textbooks. I'm going to constantly have to have my guard up. And it was the biggest surprise here was that we were rooting for each other. And that ends up, just making that extracurricular experience so much better when you feel like you're not even thinking that you're learning, you're just having fun doing something you're interested in, but you're surrounded by all these brilliant, talented, ambitious people that are rooting for you just as much as themselves. I thought that was really special. Let's talk a little bit. We have a question from Ella about just the connections and relationships. I know we've gotten into the alumni network a little bit. Ella asks about the connections and relationships that you made at Medill and how that helped you after graduation. So kind of in the moment on the with the undergraduate experience, how did Medill usher you into your career?
Well, again, almost every job I got when I was in the industry was related to being a Medill student. I mean, my first job was out of college, was at the Miami Herald, and I had gone to journalism conference for college journalism students, and met the managing editor of the Miami Herald. He had already filled his job slots for his incoming class of new reporters. And I said that I was from Medill and I worked with David Nelson, who was my professor at that time. And he said, well, come talk to me. And so I sat down and talked to him, and he made a spot for me in that class. And then when I was I was trying to get into feature writing from the Herald, and one of my classmates was at the Louisville Courier-Journal, and she called me up one day and said, hey, we've got a feature writing job. I know you're trying to get into features. You should apply for this. And I did. And I got that job. And then when a friend was leaving, another classmate was leaving Ebony magazine, and said, "Hey, I'm leaving Ebony. Do you think you might want to come to work here?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I never got a job through the want ads or kind of applying that way. It was always some Medill person tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, there's this opportunity. Why don't you apply for it?" And that's sort of been the story of my career. Even coming to teach, actually, my former instructor, Ben Baldwin, said, "We need a magazine writing instructor. Have you ever considered?" I'd never taught before. Would you ever consider teaching? I was like, "Oh, sure, I'll give it a shot." And so, yeah, it really was the network all along my path. It was, and actually, that's why I chose Medill. Quite frankly, when I was thinking about where I wanted to go to school, I am an introvert by nature. Believe it or not, even though I worked as a journalist. And I was thinking, I need a school where the network is going to help me along, because I am not naturally inclined to force myself out there into the world. I need a place where there is a network, a system, a pathway that will help me enter the business. And it happened to work that way for me.
It's great. We were gonna do one more question because we're coming up on an hour, but Noah asked a really, I think, quick and fun question that I think everyone would love to hear you answer. Does writer's block exist, or is it that we don't have anything yet to say?
No, I really do think with regard to reporting, writer's block exists, because if you've done the reporting, you've got the information. So it's not like creative writing where, oh, I have nothing to say or I don't have a story to tell. If you've done the reporting, you've got the story. But sometimes thinking through what is the best, as I said, crafting a report is a subjective exercise, and thinking through what is the best way to craft this, what's the best way into the story, what are the details that are most important, and how do I craft those in a way that is interesting and compelling, can be paralyzing for a moment or two. One of the reasons I was happy to have started my career in newspapers, even though I was a feature writer by temperament and desire, was that it forced me to let go of stories and not to treat every word as though it was precious. It did force me just to get things down on the page and move on. And that's what news reporting does. And I was really, really happy to have had the experience of having to do that, because it did force me, because I did have paralyzing writer's block at times. It was really, really difficult. But it did force me to develop the discipline to just start writing, not treat every word and every sentence as though it's precious, be clear, be concise. And after learning to do that, I got to layer on and develop my voice more in features, but I really needed the opportunity to push through in news first.
Great. All right, two-part question to end it. Just talking about your favorite parts of the Medill community and experience. I think we'll start with, what would you have said when you graduated Medill as an undergrad, 21, 22-year-old? What would you have said your favorite part was then? And as someone who has gone on to have an awesome career in the industry, come back, see the journalists of today graduating, be tapped into the alumni network and all of our faculty, what would you say your favorite part of Medill is now? Has it changed at all? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, I sit in a very different place than I did as a 22-year-old. So yes, it's changed. It's changed a lot. As a 22-year-old, my favorite parts really were working on student publications, and sort of what Andrew alluded to, working with my peers, producing. So I was on a group that created a publication. It was an arts magazine. And I was editor of the African American student publication, Blackboard. I was the second editor of that publication. And working on those and creating those publications really I felt such a sense of empowerment. Was really proud of the work we did in both of those, for both of those publications, and the team that we assembled for both of those. And it really gave me tremendous confidence in terms of going out in the world. And then just also the mentorship that I got from certain professors who were very, very kind and generous to me while I was there and afterward. My favorite part now, again, now I have a 30,000 foot view of the school. Well, no, I'm looking over the entire landscape. As a student, I had the very narrow student perspective. Now, my favorite part is just working with and trying to be responsible for the development of a number of talented people. I tell people that a jobs dean is to provide the resources and the structure for talented people to thrive. And those talented people are students, faculty, and staff. And I have the luxury of working with some of the most talented students, faculty, and staff in talented and dedicated in all of academia. And that is incredibly gratifying to me. And that is my favorite part.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking an hour. I hope this is a microcosm to everybody of another great value of the Medill experience is how accessible the faculty and even deans are, truly. So we appreciate all of you for tuning in to learn a little bit more about the journalism program and community here. And I left my email and our general admission email address in the chat for anyone who wants to reach out afterward. Thank you for all your good questions. I didn't know if we were going to get an hour's worth of questions out there, but we did. So yeah, thanks again. Appreciate you, Dean.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care, everyone.